I never thought my memories would be treated like things to be bought and sold. I always believed that the pieces of my life, carefully collected over decades, would remain in the hands of those I loved most. My children, my family. They were supposed to treasure them the way I had treasured every letter, every photograph, every chair and table that held a story. But I was wrong. The day I left this world, I thought I was leaving behind more than a house. I thought I was leaving a legacy. The house wasn't just walls and windows. It was laughter echoing down the hallways, quiet tears spilled in the corners, secrets whispered late at night, love sewn into every crack and creak of the old floorboards. The kitchen table, scarred with years of meals and children's homework, wasn't just wood. It was a witness to birthdays, arguments, reconciliations, and prayers said with trembling hands. The rocking chair by the window wasn't just a chair. It was where I held my firstborn in the quiet of the night, where I soothed fevers, and where I sat waiting for news when life kept my children far from home. And the photo albums. Oh, those albums. They were my treasure chest. Faded pictures of barefoot children running through fields, of family gathered around a cake too small for so many hungry mouths, of Christmas mornings, where our tree leaned slightly to one side. But the joy in our eyes made it the grandest tree of all. Letters from my husband, written when he worked far away to provide for us. Notes scribbled by my children when they were little, spelling mistakes and all. Each one a piece of their hearts. All of it, every piece, was sacred. Or so I thought. But when I was gone, my children didn't see what I saw. They saw dust, clutter, old things taking up space. They looked at the house where I had poured my soul and said, "It's too much. Let's sell it. Let's sell everything." And so they did, without a pause, without a whisper of hesitation. They emptied my life into boxes. Strangers walked through the rooms that once held our secrets. Strangers sat in my chair, opened my drawers, touched the quilt I had sewn by hand. They placed price tags on my memories and carried them out the door as though they were nothing but objects. The photo albums were tossed aside. "We'll scan a few pictures," they said. "The rest we don't need." My husband's letters, my most cherished gift, were bundled together and sold with miscellaneous papers. My hand-stitched curtains, my recipes written in the margins of notebooks, my jewelry box filled not with gold, but with tiny keepsakes of love. They were scattered like autumn leaves in the wind. And the house itself, sold to the highest bidder. The walls I once painted with trembling hands. The garden I nurtured through drought and storm. The very porch where I rocked my grandchildren to sleep. It no longer belonged to us. I was erased. At least, that's how it felt. Because a home is not just a place to live. It is the keeper of memory. And when it is emptied, when it is sold without care for what it carried, it feels as though the person who built it never truly existed. I thought my children would remember. I thought they would hold my things, touch them, and feel me in them. But instead they rushed to erase, to move forward, to strip my memory down to nothing more than a few boxes they could store in an attic. I wanted to cry out. "Don't you see? These are not things. They are pieces of me. To lose them is to lose me. But the living rarely hear the voices of the gone." And so I watched, helpless, as everything I held dear slipped through their fingers into the hands of strangers. When you live a long life, your possessions stop being just objects. They become vessels, containers of stories, of love, of struggles overcome. Each piece in my home had a heartbeat, because it carried mine. Take the quilt folded at the foot of my bed. To anyone else, it was a faded patchwork blanket, worn thin in places. To me, it was every night I sat hunched over scraps of fabric, sewing by the dim light of a lamp while my children slept. Each square came from something meaningful. The blue from an old dress my daughter wore on her first day of school. The yellow from a shirt my husband once loved. The floral piece from curtains that had hung in our first little house. When I pulled that quilt over myself, I wasn't just warming my body. I was wrapping myself in the very fabric of our history. Yet when my children cleaned the house, they tossed it into a pile for donation. "It's too old," one said. "No one uses heavy quilts anymore." They didn't see the memories stitched into it. They saw only worn fabric, or the kitchen table. Oh, how I wish that table could speak. Its surface was carved with years of living. Scratches from little hands cutting paper, dents from pots set down too roughly, faint ink stains from homework assignments. Around that table we celebrated birthdays, shared news both joyful and tragic, argued about curfews and responsibilities, and prayed for strength when money was tight. That table carried the weight of our family in more ways than one. But they sold it to a couple who wanted a rustic piece for their dining room. They would polish it, sand it down, strip it of its scars. The very marks that made it beautiful to me. To them it was decoration. To me it was life, and the rocking chair, my old creaky rocking chair by the window. That was where I rocked my firstborn through countless sleepless nights, where I soothed fevers with lullabies, where I sat waiting for my husband's letters during the long months he was away. Later it was where I held my grandchildren, their small heads nestled against my chest as I hummed the same lullabies. That chair held generations of love. But when strangers walked through my home, they tested its sturdiness, complained about the squeak, and bargained the price down. To them it was just old furniture. To me it was a sanctuary. Then there were the photo albums. My heart aches most when I think of them. Albums filled with faces, laughter frozen in time, milestones captured on film. My children flipped through them quickly, pulling out a few favorites to keep. "We don't need all of these," they said. "Too many duplicates, too much clutter." But how do you decide which memories are worth keeping? How do you choose between the smile of a child missing their first tooth and the proud look of a teenager holding a diploma? How do you discard moments that will never come again? To me, every photo mattered, even the blurry ones, even the ones where someone's eyes were half closed. Because they were real. They were us. And now, many of them are gone. Sold, discarded, forgotten. And the letters. Oh, those letters. My husband wrote them when he worked far from home, his words spilling across the page with longing and love. I kept every single one, tied neatly with ribbon, reading them again and again whenever I missed him. His handwriting was my anchor through years of separation, his words proof that even distance couldn't dim devotion. But my children bundled them into a box labeled Old Papers. They didn't see the trembling hands that once held those letters, the tears that stained the ink, the hope those envelopes carried across miles. To them it was clutter. To me it was love. Piece by piece they stripped the house bare. The curtains I sewed, the dishes that fed us, the jewelry box filled not with gold, but with trinkets of meaning, all gone. And when the house was empty, they walked through it with satisfied expressions. "It looks so much cleaner," they said. "So much lighter." But to me it felt hollow, like a heart stripped of its memories. Like I had been erased. Because those things weren't just mine. They were supposed to be theirs too. I had kept them safe, not out of selfishness, but because I thought one day they would want to hold them, touch them, and feel connected to the story that made us who we are. Instead, they chose to forget, to exchange memory for money, to trade love's weight for convenience. And in doing so, they taught me something painful but true. Sometimes the things we hold dearest are invisible to others. Sometimes the treasures of a life are only the treasures to the one who lived it. Still, I wonder, will they regret it one day? When they are older, will they wish they had kept more than a few pictures? Will they ache for the sound of the rocking chair, the warmth of the quilt, the sight of the old kitchen table? I do not know. But I know this. When you sell someone's memories, you do not just sell objects. You sell pieces of their soul, and once they are gone, you can never buy them back. They say that time heals all wounds, but I have found that time often buries them under dust, in silence. The children said they were busy. They said selling things was only practical. They said memories are just things. But in those words lay a truth darker than any object. When we do not preserve the past, we begin to erase the people who lived it. I woke one morning after the house was emptied of its soul. The empty walls echoed with nothing. The floors held shadows of things that once were. The garden bench where I sat with my husband, sipping evening tea, was gone. The smell of old wood and laughter had been swept away. I could feel absence in every corner, a weight pressing on my chest. How often had I walked past my photo albums, flipping pages lightly, touching the edges of pictures where hands had been cut out or smiles faded? How often had I looked at the old letters, hearing my husband's steady hand in the scroll, remembering what his voice sounded like? All those moments felt like small rivers running through my heart. Yet my children treated them as if they were rivers that no longer matter. Memory is more than nostalgia. It's identity. It's who we are. And to lose our memories without being asked, that is to lose part of ourselves. They sold my kitchen table. That table had seen scraped knees and broken promises. It had seen cake frosting stuck to its surface and tears wiped away on its wood. It was witness. Now it was someone else's furniture. The funny thing is, none of them seemed to understand the weight of what they were doing. They saw old furniture, old photos, old letters. They saw clutter. They did not see stories. They did not see childhoods, laughter, grief, forgiveness, growth. They did not see me. Sometimes I overheard them speak to each other about the job of clearing the house, the price they could get for certain antiques, the weight of renting a storage unit. But in those conversations, no one ever whispered, "What will my mother feel when she looks for her quilt and it's gone?" No one ever breathed, "What will I lose if these things are sold?" Once I asked in my dreamlike state, "Do you not care what you are erasing?" But in waking there was no answer, just the quietness, the hollow rooms, the empty spaces that once held laughter. There have been moments when visitors come, relatives I had not seen in years. They glance at the empty walls. They peer into the closets. One cousin came, her voice polite but curious. "Eleanor, where are all the old pictures? And what happened to the rocking chair by the window?" I swallowed the sadness, trying to steady my voice. "They were sold." She nodded as though I had spoken about someone else's things. "Oh, I see." No gasp, no sorrow. Just that flicker in her eyes before she turned away. In that moment, I felt a sharp hollow inside me. Not because they didn't understand, but because I thought they should. These were not just my memories. They were part of the family story. And now, for many of them, the chapters had disappeared. I wonder how many times people sell memories without thinking of the person whose life was in them. Or worse, without thinking of what those memories meant to the one who lived there. Yet even in this pain, I found something else. A longing to be remembered. Not for objects, but for moments. For laughter shared, hands held, lessons taught. I wanted someone to say, "I remember when she used to." To remember the woman who baked bread at dawn, who hummed lullabies while stitching quilts, who held her family together through storms both inside and outside. So I began to write. I opened a notebook and wrote down my memories, tied to each object that once existed, the quilt that kept me warm, the letters that made me feel belonging, the pictures that carried youth and hope. I wrote so that, even if the things were gone, the stories would remain. I wrote how the house smelled of jasmine at night, when the breeze would blow through the open windows. I wrote how my husband used to sit on the steps knocking the dust off his boots after a long day, smiling tiredly. I wrote how children's footsteps echoed on the staircase in the early morning, rushing down for breakfast. And in writing, I felt that though the stuff might be sold, though the physical things vanished, the memory of them could be held somewhere else, in hearts, in words. One day, a young neighbor stopped by. She peered in through the open gate. I heard the house was sold, she said softly. Your memories. Were they sold too? I smiled through tears. No, I told her. They live here. I placed my hand over my heart. And here? I pointed to my head. Maybe you won't see them on the walls. Maybe you won't smell them in the air. But they are real. She nodded, her eyes moist. And in her face I saw acknowledgement. That someone sees not just the empty house, but the stories inside. That was a balm to my aching soul. Because being remembered isn't about preserving objects. It's about preserving meaning. And meaning lives in others. In stories told. In memories spoken. In love carried forward. As I write this, the house is gone. The furniture is gone. The quilts are gone. The letters are gone. The photo albums are mostly gone. But I am not gone. I am here. I was here. I was a mother. A grandmother. I baked bread. I patched clothes. I held children in my arms. I taught faith, forgiveness, hard work. I loved, if nothing else remains, let that remain. That I was. That I loved. That I hope to be remembered. They may have sold my things, but they cannot sell my story. It was some weeks after the house was sold that one of my daughters came back to visit the property. She walked through the gate slowly, as though afraid of what she might see. The garden was already changing. The new owners had pulled out my rose bushes, planting their own flowers. The bench where I once sat with my husband was gone, replaced by a sleek chair that had no memory carved into it. She stood there, clutching her purse, looking around with eyes that carried a heaviness. And then, for the first time since everything had been sold, I saw regret flicker across her face. She walked inside, into the empty rooms. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She paused in the living room where our Christmas tree once stood, her hand brushing along the wall as though expecting to feel the warmth that once lived there. Finally, she whispered, "It feels so empty." Of course it was empty. It had been stripped bare, not just of furniture, but of soul. I wanted to reach out, to place my hand on her shoulder, to tell her, "You did not just sell things. You sold pieces of me." But instead I simply stood nearby, watching her wrestle with something she couldn't quite name. That evening she spoke to her brother on the phone. I heard her voice tremble as she said, "I think we made a mistake. I think we shouldn't have sold everything so quickly." His answer was tired, dismissive. "They were just things, Anna. We couldn't keep all of it. You know how much space it took. You know how expensive it was. We had no choice." But Anna didn't agree. For the first time, she said, "It wasn't just things. It was Mom." And in that moment, my heart cracked open. Because finally, someone saw. She returned the next day with a small box. Inside it were a few things she had managed to rescue before the sale was complete. My recipe book, worn at the edges, filled with grease stains and notes, a scarf I used to wear every winter, and one single photograph of our family when all the children were small, sitting on the front porch steps with ice cream dripping down their hands. She held the box tightly. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mama. I should have kept more. I should have known better. I was so busy, so tired, so overwhelmed. But I should have remembered that this was you." I wanted to tell her, it's never too late to remember. I wanted to tell her, even if everything else is gone, this one photograph, this one recipe book, this one scarf, if you hold them with love, it is enough, because regret can eat a person alive, but forgiveness can set them free. And I knew in that moment that my story was not about bitterness. It was about teaching my children what it truly means to remember someone, not through possessions, but through carrying love forward. Anna started to cook from my recipe book again. She told her own children's stories while stirring soup or baking bread, saying, "This was your grandmother's recipe. She used to make it every Sunday." The scarf she wore one winter morning, telling her daughter, "This was my mother's. When I wear it, I feel her near." And the photograph. She framed it. She placed it on her wall. And every time she looked at it, she remembered the porch, the ice cream, the laughter. One photograph became a doorway back into 1,000 memories. The others perhaps still do not see. Perhaps they still think objects are just objects. But for Anna, something changed. She began to understand that memory is not about hoarding everything. It is about keeping the right things. The things that breathe life into stories. The things that keep love alive. And in her change, I found peace. I realized that though so much had been lost, not everything was gone. What was essential could still live on. The house may be gone. The furniture may be gone. The albums may be scattered. But the story, our story, still beats in the hearts of those who choose to carry it. And I thought to myself, maybe that is enough. Because no matter what is sold, no matter what is lost, love cannot be sold. Love cannot be boxed up, priced, and handed to strangers. Love endures. Love remains. And in that, I discovered the beginning of forgiveness. I used to believe that the things we leave behind are what keep us alive in the memories of those who come after us. The rocking chairs, the quilts, the photographs, the letters, all the things that once held our touch. I believed that if those objects disappeared, so too would we. But now, after everything has been taken, after the walls of my home echo no more with familiar laughter, I have learned something different. We are not our furniture. We are not our curtains or our tables or our rocking chairs. We are not even the photo albums that capture our faces in frozen moments of time. We are the warmth behind the photographs. We are the voices that were once heard within those walls. We are the love that cooked the meals, the patience that soothed the fevers, the faith that carried our families through storms. Those things cannot be sold. A stranger can carry away my quilt, but they cannot carry away the nights I spent stitching hope into every thread. They cannot take the lullabies I sang, the lessons I taught, or the forgiveness I gave. Those things are not stored in fabric or wood or paper. They are stored in hearts, and if even one heart remembers, then I am not lost. Anna remembers. She wears my scarf on cold mornings and feels me close. She cooks my recipes, telling her children stories about me as the smell of bread fills the kitchen. She gazes at that one photograph on her wall, and suddenly the porch, the laughter, the melted ice cream, all come alive again. That is enough. Perhaps my other children still don't understand. Perhaps they still see things where I see memories. But maybe one day they too will hold something small in their hands and feel a tug at their hearts. Maybe they'll hear a story passed down from Anna's children, or taste a recipe they had long forgotten, and suddenly they will know. Because remembrance has a way of finding us. It may not come through objects, but it will come through love. And that is what I want to leave behind. Not bitterness, not regret, but love. If you're listening to my story, if you have ever felt the ache of being forgotten, or the sting of seeing your memories swept aside, I want to tell you this. You are not your things. You are not your house. You are not your photographs. You are the way you made people feel. You are the kindness you gave freely. You are the sacrifices you made quietly. You are the laughter you spread, the hope you planted, the forgiveness you offered. Those are the true heirlooms. Those are the treasures that cannot be boxed, priced, or sold. When the day comes that your own children must face what to do with your belongings, they may make mistakes. They may sell what you hoped they'd keep. They may forget the value of the little things that meant the world to you. But do not despair, because what matters most, the love you gave, the stories you told, the faith you lived, will remain, as long as even one person chooses to remember. And even if no one remembers, even if your name fades into silence, love itself never dies. The love you gave ripples through time in ways you may never see. A smile you offered a stranger may change their whole day. A lesson you taught a child may shape how they treat their own children. A prayer whispered in secret may guard someone you never even meet. We are far bigger than our things. So yes, they sold my memories without asking. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it felt like erasure. But in truth, nothing essential was lost, because I am still here in the stories, in the recipes, in the scarf around my daughter's shoulders, in the photograph on her wall, and I am still here in the love that I poured out every single day of my life. If you hear my voice now, let it remind you. Cherish the people in your life, not just their things. Listen to their stories while they are alive. Ask about their memories, their dreams, their struggles. Take the time to sit in their kitchens, to eat at their tables, to learn the recipes, to laugh at the same old jokes, to hold their hands, because one day, the things may be gone. The house may be sold. The photo albums may fade. But the way you make each other feel, that will outlast everything. So live with love. Remember with tenderness. And when the time comes, carry forward not just objects, but hearts. That is how we are truly remembered. They sold her memories without asking, believing they were only things. But what they didn't understand is that memories cannot be carried away in boxes, nor can love be priced or sold. A home may be emptied, belongings scattered, but the spirit of a life well lived remains in the laughter remembered, the recipes cooked again, the stories told to children and grandchildren. Let this be a reminder. Cherish your loved ones while you still have them. Listen to their stories and hold on to their love, because in the end it is not things that keep us alive. It is love.